2,000 people sailed into that jungle. 1,200 never came back. They didn't die in battle. They didn't drown in a storm. They rotted, slowly, in the mud of a swamp no European had any business touching. Fever took them. Dysentery took them. Starvation finished the rest. And the worst part? Their own king let it happen. The people who funded this disaster weren't soldiers of fortune or reckless pirates. They were Scottish merchants, Scottish farmers, Scottish widows who pooled every coin they had into a single dream. A dream of empire. A dream of finally mattering on the world stage. Instead, they got a graveyard in Panama. And that graveyard didn't just bury people. It buried a nation. Scotland in the 1690s is suffocating. England blocks Scottish merchants from every colonial trade route on Earth. No Americas, no India, no Caribbean. While London drowns in profit, Edinburgh watches from the outside. Then, famine hits. 5 years of failed harvests. Somewhere between 5 and 15% of the entire Scottish population dies. Not in war, from hunger. Scotland needs a lifeline, fast. A man named William Paterson has one. He co-founded the Bank of England. He understands money better than almost anyone alive. And he has spotted something extraordinary on the map. A strip of land in Panama, 60 miles wide, Atlantic on one side, Pacific on the other. Build a colony there. Build a road across it. Charge every ship on Earth a toll. Whoever controls that crossing controls global trade. Spain had owned it for 2 centuries. Scotland would take it. The Scottish Parliament creates a trading company. Within months, the nation raises £400,000, half of all liquid capital in Scotland. Nobles, merchants, widows, everyone bets everything on this one idea. If it works, Scotland becomes an empire. If it fails, no one has thought that far ahead. They should have. July 1698. 5 ships leave Edinburgh Harbor. 1,200 men, women, and children. Soldiers, surgeons, ministers, merchants. They carry trade goods, wool blankets, leather shoes, combs, Bibles. Products designed for a temperate European market. Nobody thought to ask whether Panamanian jungle tribes needed wool blankets in 35-degree heat. The crowds on the shore are weeping with pride. Flags wave, cannons fire. Scotland is going to war with poverty itself. Nobody on those docks understands what those ships are sailing into. The crossing takes 3 months. By the time the fleet reaches the Darien coast in November, the mood has already shifted. The jungle they find is nothing like the maps promised. Dense, suffocating, humming with insects. The air sits on your chest like wet concrete. They name the settlement New Caledonia. They build a fort. They call it Fort St. Andrew. And then they wait for the trade ships that Paterson promised would come. None come. King William's betrayal. Here is where the story turns from tragedy into something darker. King William II knows about the colony. He knows it is struggling, and he makes a decision that will echo through Scottish history for 300 years. He orders every English colonial governor in the Americas, Jamaica, New York, Barbados, to refuse all aid to the Scottish settlers.
no food, no supplies, no shelter. Any English merchant caught trading with New Caledonia faces punishment. The reason is cold and simple. England is negotiating with Spain. The Darien colony threatens those negotiations. Scottish lives are inconvenient diplomatic baggage. William doesn't send soldiers to destroy the colony. He doesn't need to. He just closes every door. And then he waits. In the jungle, people start dying. The food the settlers brought begins to rot in the humidity. The trade goods sit untouched in warehouses. Fever moves through the camp like a fire. Men who arrived healthy are dead within weeks. The surgeon's logs from this period are almost unreadable. Page after page of the same words. Fever, flux, dead. Fever, flux, dead. Paterson himself watches his wife die in that jungle. He survives barely, a skeletal ghost of the visionary who launched a nation's dreams. After 7 months, the survivors make a decision. They abandon the colony. They burn what they cannot carry. They sail north. Of the 1,200 who landed, roughly 300 make it back to Scotland alive. Now pay attention, because this is the part that defies all logic. Scotland sends a second expedition. Before news of the first colony's collapse even reaches Edinburgh, a second fleet of 1,300 settlers is already at sea. They arrive at Darien to find Fort St. Andrew abandoned, overgrown, silent except for insects. They rebuild anyway. This time the Spanish don't wait. A force of infantry surrounds the settlement by land. Spanish warships blockade the coast by sea. The Scots are trapped between jungle and ocean, with dwindling supplies and no hope of English help. The siege lasts weeks. The Scottish commander, a man named Campbell of Fonab, wins one skirmish against a Spanish advance column, a small, furious victory that briefly makes him a hero back home. But one skirmish doesn't break a siege. In April 1700, the colony surrenders. The survivors are allowed to leave with their lives. They sail away on whatever vessels can still float. Storms claim several ships on the return journey. Of the 1,300 who came in the second wave, the death toll across both expeditions reaches somewhere near 2,000 total. 2,000 people gone. The Company of Scotland is destroyed. The 400,000 pounds, half of Scotland's liquid capital, is simply gone, wiped out. There is no recovery mechanism, no central bank bailout, no government safety net. The investors lose everything. The economic shockwave tears through Scottish society. Businesses collapse. Families lose their savings across generations. The merchant class that funded the venture is gutted. And in the wreckage, England sees its opportunity. English negotiators arrive in Edinburgh with a proposal. Union. Scotland and England merge into a single kingdom. One parliament, one economy, one flag. The offer includes something critical: English debt assumption. England will compensate Scottish investors for their Darien losses, roughly £398,000, paid directly to the shareholders of the Company of Scotland. The payment has a name that Scots still use today, spoken with a particular kind of bitterness: the equivalent. It is, depending on your perspective, either a generous settlement or the most elegant bribe in European history.
You take a nation, you watch it destroy itself on a project you quietly sabotaged. And then you offer to pay the survivors for the privilege of surrendering their independence. The Scottish Parliament debates the Union through the winter of 1706 and 1707. The debate is fierce. Petitions against the Union flood into Edinburgh from across the country. Crowds protest in the streets. The poet Robert Burns would later write that Scottish parliamentarians were bought and sold for English gold. On the 1st of May, 1707, the Acts of Union come into force. Scotland ceases to exist as an independent state. May the 1st, 1707. One signature, one document. 300 years of Scottish sovereignty ended. No invasion, no battlefield, no conquered king dragged through the streets in chains. Scotland didn't fall to an army. It fell to a spreadsheet, to a debt it couldn't pay, to a jungle it couldn't survive. Think about what just happened. England didn't need to fight Scotland. It just needed to wait. Block the trade routes, starve the economy, let a desperate nation make one catastrophic gamble. Then offer to pay the bill. The mechanics of that payment are worth examining closely. The equivalent, £398,000, was not handed to the Scottish people. It was handed to the shareholders, to the wealthy investors who had funded the Darien venture. Ordinary Scots who lost savings, livelihoods, family members in that jungle received nothing. The compensation went to the same elite class that had gambled the nation into ruin in the first place. The men who signed the Acts of Union knew exactly what they were doing. Some of them had lost money in Darien themselves. They were signing away their nation to recover their personal investment. Private bankruptcy dressed up as statesmanship. And they knew it. The debates inside the Scottish Parliament that winter were not the debates of men wrestling with principle. They were the debates of men calculating personal survival. Outside the Parliament in Edinburgh that day, crowds gathered. They weren't celebrating. They were furious. Stones were thrown, windows shattered. The commissioner who carried the signed treaty out of the building reportedly did so in secret through a back alley, terrified of what the crowd would do if they found him in the open. The people of Scotland never voted for union. They were never asked. Their parliament, the institution that was supposed to represent them, sold itself. And the price was precisely calibrated to make enough powerful men comfortable enough to stop fighting. Daniel Defoe was in Edinburgh that winter, the author of Robinson Crusoe. He was there not as a writer, but as an English spy, reporting back to London on the mood of the Scottish Parliament, identifying which members needed additional persuasion. He wrote afterward that he had never seen a population so enraged and so powerless at the same time. Enraged and powerless. That is the combination that ends nations. And the man who started it all, William Paterson, lived to see the union he never intended to create. He had wanted to build a Scottish empire. Instead, he handed England a Scottish parliament on a silver plate. He petitioned the new British government for compensation for his own Darien losses for years. They gave him £18,000, a fraction of what he had lost, a fraction of what he had cost his country. He died in 1719,
12 years after the Union, quietly, in London. The man who changed the map of the world and was remembered only for a disaster in a swamp. The jungle took everything from him: his wife, his fortune, his nation. And it did it in less than 2 years.
Scotland still exists. The culture, the language, the memory. But the parliament that sent 1,200 people to die in a swamp, that parliament never sat again. Here is the thing about the Darien disaster that nobody talks about. England didn't beat Scotland. Scotland beat itself. One bad idea, sold by one brilliant man, funded by an entire nation's hope. That is all it took. Empires are not always destroyed by enemies. Sometimes they are destroyed by dreams. This story is just the beginning. There are hundreds of moments in history where one decision changed everything, where one man's vision collapsed an entire civilization. Subscribe. The next one is already waiting.